Welcome everyone to this sixth webinar on disability inclusion, and this webinar is going to cover hosting accessible online meeting. It's my pleasure to be with you here today. My name is Heba Khalif. I hope you can see my screen. I have a master's degree from the University of Birmingham in United Kingdom, and I've been working in the field of disability inclusion for more than 20 years now in Egypt. I'm based in Alexandria in Egypt, and I'm a person with visual impairment who is a screen reader user. So today the agenda of the webinar is going to cover the hosting accessible online meetings. We will start with the disability and accessibility in relation to accessibility, and then we will go ahead and explore the different online collaboration platforms. We are very delighted and pleased to have with us here Shiva Shreya from UN Nepal. He's a disability coordination officer with more than 15 years experience in the field, and he has a master's degree in human rights and arts, and he's working in the UN Resident Coordination Office in Nepal in the area of disability inclusion. He will also be contributing to the meeting today, and he will be a co-speaker. Disability, as defined in the CRPD, persons with disabilities are persons with long-term physical, sensory, mental or intellectual impairment, which in interaction with various barriers can hinder the full and effective participations in society. As you know, that the United Nations Disability Inclusion Strategy differentiates clearly between impairments and barriers, and explains this interaction in a kind of formula which states that impairments plus barriers, this is what creates the disability, but impairments plus accessibility and barrier-free environment will not create the disabling conditions. So, for example, let's say that I invited you to a physical meeting, and there's persons who are wheelchair users, but the door to the premises or the entrance to the premises is not accessible. This can create a curb cut, which will not make persons with wheelchair users who are wheelchair users able to participate. And having our digital environment with a lot of barriers, this can be considered an electronic curb cut, so that persons with disabilities will not be able to access a service or a software or a document. So accessibility is the quality of anything being usable or reachable or obtainable, or the people with disabilities should be able to reach, speak with, understand, and interact with any service or program or document. In Article 2 of the CRPD, it defines accessible communications as any means or form of communications whether delivered orally or visually or tactilely, that would enable persons with disabilities to interact. And it specifically mentions a few communication needs like Braille, like tactile, or raised line drawings, sign language, spoken language, and also it mentions the accessible information technology communications and facilitative communication and augmentative communications. So all these means are considered accessible communication methods. With the COVID-19 pandemic, there came the need to find new work modalities that depend more on online meetings and online collaboration platforms. So the COVID-19 had witnessed a blooming in the development of these technologies. And even with the regress of the pandemic, a lot of the organizations and entities revert to more of a hybrid work modality in order to accommodate for their employees with different needs, and to also overcome the barrier of limited physical places. So that's why the uh, physical the hybrid work modality depend more on online collaboration platforms. So there are a lot of types of events that could be established using Microsoft Teams online collaboration platform. So for instance, we have the Microsoft Teams meeting, we have the webinar, the webinar, and we have the live event. All these platforms can be used with Microsoft Teams. So I would like to give the floor over to my colleague Shiva, who can explain some accessibility or some barriers that would face him as a person with visual impairments using these online platforms, and then I will continue afterwards. Over to you, Shiva.
Can you hear me?
Shiva, are you here?
Yeah.
Yes. If you can introduce yourself and if you can
Sure,
explain a little bit
sure.
more about the accessibility barriers that you might face in online meetings, that would be really great.
Sure. So for example, right now, I don't know whether some of you could hear my laptop was telling me, there's a pop-out chat, raise hands, Q&A, those kind of things when I was navigating through. Even if you didn't hear it, it's okay. I'm gonna explain it. Hi, I'm Sibo Acharya from Nepal. I joined UN in last October as a disability inclusion coordinator here. So I would focus on, let's say, as Heva has asked me, accessibility. When we discuss about accessibility, let's say, whether it's a platform, online platform, or document you are sharing, or it's a PowerPoint, uh, whatever it is that is being shared or used for the meeting, we wish to be accessible. And like Heba, I'm also visually impaired, and I'm also a screen reader user. So I use the inbuilt voiceover screen reader in Apple laptop. So if there's anything that my screen reader can't read, uh, or if there are something that I cannot navigate with the voiceover with a screen reader, that's absolutely kind of that thing turn into useless things. Maybe it's frustrating time for me. It irritates me that I cannot navigate to the document or PowerPoint or even platform like this Microsoft Team. Um, for example, I have turned my screen reader off now, but if I turn it on, it keeps telling me who has entered the lobby or who has left the call continuously. But saying that there's a setting where you can go and stop the notification. But as I was, the point I'm trying to kind of make here is sometimes we prefer one over other also, like what I am used to would be more familiar, and then I would also use their accessibility features. For example, In Nepal, we used to use Zoom a lot. And then I am much familiar with the Zoom accessibility features than with the Microsoft Team. But now I'm also kind of familiarizing myself with the features available here in Microsoft Team, and I'm also becoming more how can like proficient in Microsoft Team as well. So what I'm trying to say here is like accessibility is something that really is a door or a pathway that enable us to participate, that enable us to contribute, and that made us feel equal like anybody else. So this is really an important aspect when we discuss about inclusion and when we want to ensure participation of persons with disabilities in any events. Is it okay if I stop here, Heba?
Yes, Shiva, and then
Okay.
I will go. I will give the floor over to you again when we are discussing the development of the
Yes,
ICT in Nepal.
sure. Yes, sure. Thank you.
All right, yes, thank you, Shiva. As we heard from Shiva, because he's a person who is a screen reader user and who needs a little bit more time to be familiar with online collaboration platforms, it would be very beneficial for organizers to accommodate or to be mindful of the accessibility measures that we have to use. So, as I said, there are 3 types of events available on MS Teams. There is a Teams meeting, which accommodate for up to 1,000 participants. There's a webinar, which accommodate for 10,000 participants. And there's a live event, which accommodate for 100,000 participants. And the choice of each of these platforms will depend on the level of interaction and responsiveness that the organizers wishes to provide in their event. So, in your opinion, what are the accessibility features that should be available in any online meeting platform, according to what Shiva discussed, that should be provided by the meeting organizers? So you can write in the chat, and I can allow the mic for you if you like, so that you can feel free to share with us your opinion. So I'm also a person who is using a screen reader, so sometimes it takes me a little bit more time to do the action. So if you can just bear with me, I will allow you the mic. So now I believe you have the option to open your mic and start interacting if you like. And also because I would very much like a volunteer from the audience to help with reading the chat messages, because I don't have sighted assistants with me today. So if you would like to volunteer to read the incoming chat messages, that would be really great. And you can unmute your mic and start interacting about what are the accessibility measures that should be available in online meetings. All right, I'm not really sure if there are any incoming messages in the chat, so I'll go ahead and move to the next slide. So there are some accessibility settings that are available in Microsoft Teams. For example, organizers can turn together mode on, and this mode will choose a virtual background for all the participants, unified background for all the participants, so that the speakers and presenters will be more visible. And a dark background could be chosen so that the participants will be more visibly seen by persons with low vision and partial sight. Also, a sign language interpreter option can be automatically enabled not only by meeting organizers, but also by meeting attendees. All these features can be available in Microsoft Teams settings, accessibility, and I will show you momentarily how to do that. Also, to turn off animations is very helpful, especially for screen reader users and for users who are neurodiverse, who have difficulty seeing some flashing and moving objects. Enabling automatic live captions is very important for persons with hearing impairment, but also we have to take into account that automatic captions are not accurate. I was working a lot with the automatic transcriptions, and I noticed that the interpretation or the artificial intelligence or tools that automatically transcribe the words are not very accurate. So if your meeting is going to contain any confidential information that needs to be accurately interpreted, you should opt for professional third-party captioners instead. Also, in MS Teams, there are three main roles for any online meetings. There is the organizers and the speakers, or the presenters and the attendees. And each of these assigned roles have a role to play in order to provide accessibility for the online meetings. Because as we say, that the accessibility is the responsibility for everyone. So for organizers, they should turn on automatic live captions. They should also mute the notifications because if you don't mute the notification, the screen reader will start reading all the incoming notifications or everyone who is joining or leaving, which is really not helping if the person is using screen readers. Also, turning together mode on, as I said before, will create a unified background for users, and pinning and spotlighting individuals or certain participants is very helpful because meeting organizers can spotlight the sign language interpreters that are present in the meeting along with the presenters so that they can be seen by everyone in the meeting. There are 7 video feeds that can be chosen from organizers to be spotlighted in the meeting. And always try to use a dark background when using your virtual background in order to provide more accessibility in your online meeting. The feed to frame option is very helpful for persons who are using sign language. Also, with the housekeeping tips at the beginning of the event, it's always helpful to announce the accessibility features in place, like that the meeting is being recorded or transcribed, or the mechanism that you set for attendees to raise their hands or answer questions or intervene with any comments. For presenters, the presenters should provide verbal descriptions for any visual, non-textual content they are presenting. If appropriate, they can describe themselves and their surroundings. If possible, they should turn on their camera and sit exactly opposite, facing the camera with their lips and their face clearly visible in order to enable persons who are lip readers to read their lips. They should be sitting with the light source coming from in front of them, not at the back, because if when lights comes from their back, this is not very helpful, as this will create some shadows. And also for attendees, they can apply some accessibility features to make the meeting more accessible for them. They can hide incoming video, they can hide their own videos, and they can pin some video feeds for participants, as I said, for sign language interpreters, for instance. And the difference between pinning and spotlighting is that when you pin a video feed for a participant, you pin it for your own, for you only. But when the organizers spotlight a video, it's spotlighted for all the attendees. When answering a question or commenting, always start by saying your name, and always end your speech by giving the floor over to and saying the name of the next person in line or their presenter, so that this could be captured by the automated live captioning or transcribing services or by the sign language interpreters. So now we are going to speak about the Zoom, but before going on to the Zoom platform, I'd like to see if anyone has any questions. Please feel free to use your mic and ask your questions. I will also try to open the chat to check that there are no chat messages available. I really apologize for that. I'm not able to read the chat messages, so I go ahead and move on, and then at the end of the webinar, I will try to see if the mics can be muted, unmuted from your side, and also I will address all the questions in the chat messages. So as for the Zoom, it also provides some accessibility features similar to what's available in MS Teams. So meeting organizers can also spotlight and pin video feeds for participants, and they can also enable automatic live captions, or they can have third-party captioning service also available. When you are creating breakout rooms, either in Zoom or MS Teams, always try to opt for the manual breakout room option, because this will enable you to make sign language interpreters in the same room as persons with hearing impairment. When you're speaking, always slow down your pace in order to enable sign language interpreters to interpret, people who are lip reading to read, or automated live captions or third-party live captions to capture your words. Enable always show meeting controls for attendees in order to give them an opportunity to change the meeting options. And always mute participants upon entry, because persons with screen readers might find it difficult to might find it difficult for them to unmute themselves. You can describe verbally any visual content that is being presented, and provide any instructions for participants to address their interventions or questions, and send any questions or comments in the chat, and try to read it out loud if you are presenting. And limit the use of the Zoom polling features, because this is not very accessible. If you have any annotations, please make sure to read them out loud, and directly face the camera if you are presenting, make sure your face and your lips are visible, and make sure your session is being recorded. So before the online meeting, there's a number of accessibility measures you have to take into account. First, make sure that your registration page is accessible. Make sure your form fields are labeled correctly. Make sure that do not use color alone as the only means of distinguishing information, so that if you have mandatory fields that has to be filled, make sure to include this information in a text message alerting users if they did not fill in these automatic or mandatory fields. Make sure all your alerts are presented in text, not only in colors. Secure sufficient time to prepare for the event. Be sure to share the presentation in advance with participants if possible. And make sure to choose a self-explanatory event name in your registration page as well. And you can start your online meetings a little bit early to make sure that persons with disabilities are more familiar with your online platform that you're using. Always contact the presenters to make sure how they would like to be addressed, and make sure, as I said, that not only the form fields are accessible, but also the links in the registration page are accessible too. Before the online meeting, check your interactive platforms that you might be using. Sometimes people would use Mentimeter or Slido or Miro. Mentimeter is the least accessible of these interactive sharing slides platform, because the content flashes too much, and this is difficult for users who are individuals who are neurodiverse. Also, for screen reader users, Mentimeter is a little bit difficult. But Slido is more accessible because items that are presented there do not flash too much. If using an interactive platform, make sure that also you give another alternative mechanism for users to share their comments in the chat, for instance, because it's very difficult for screen reader users to navigate through open windows and select the online collaborations slide sharing platform and provide their comments through that. It would be easier for them to provide their comments in the chat directly. During the meeting, there are a number of accessibility measures you have to take into account. You have to explain the event logistics, for instance, that the fixed mechanism that you put in place for users to contribute with their interventions or questions. You can keep a list of questions ready for the presenter in case there are not much interaction in the online meetings. Sometimes online meetings have low levels of engagement when compared to physical meetings. You can repeat the questions or comments in the chat, which unfortunately I'm unable to do now because I'm a person with visual impairment myself. But if you have a sighted assistant, be sure to repeat the questions in the chat. And towards the end, thank the attendees and share any follow-up contacts for them to raise any questions. So you can exercise with yourself setting and scheduling an online meeting. Be sure to explore all the available options, like using together mode in order to unify the background, or using the fit to frame option, or hiding your incoming videos, exploring applying dark backgrounds in order to for you and the presenters to be more clearly visible. So after the meeting, make sure that all online resources are accessible and available for attendees to to send you any follow-up questions. And Provide any notes, slides, or materials distributed during the meeting to meeting attendees via email, not only via the chat, because sometimes navigating the chat feature in either Zoom or MS Teams is quite difficult. And always survey attendees about their level of satisfaction, and try to include an option about accessibility in your feedback forms. And you can record any future recommendations or suggestions, especially regarding accessibility, to use in your next online meetings. So that is the end of my slides, PowerPoint slides. And now I will give the floor over to Shiva to explain the Nepalese experience in providing accessible digital content. Over to you, Shiva.
Thank you, Hema.
Sorry?
Oh, okay, yeah. So now I will discuss a few things on content, developing content. First of all, when we want to look about, let's say, presentations, we all want it to be look good. We care about aesthetic aspect, and there's also a misconception that accessible PowerPoints or accessible documents are actually not nicer. It's a misconception. You can absolutely make a very good looking document and also accessible one. So first of all, I would say a few things we need to be careful of while creating document. And there's also exercise that we carry out in Nepal. So since there's also this disability inclusion pilot project. So under this, people were trying to do a few things here. And most often I heard that, oh, this is difficult to do, or there are many people who says, I want to do, but I don't know how to do. So these were like two most common comments you would hear from people when you kind of force conversation on accessibility. I think for both of them, I think it's always easy. Like accessibility checker is always there in a Word, PowerPoint, and Excel that we can keep it running while we work. And I'm sure Hiva will include in her presentation and the thing we'll share. I think there's also where how to find accessibility checker and how to run it there. Before this, and in the content wise, let's say when we have any image, then we always should remember to have an image description, and which is different from captioning. When we have some photographs, for example, and photographs may have some caption that may be telling about the event of the photo, or what that maybe about program, or maybe somebody in the photo handing over something, whatever it can be according to the projects or context. But the image description should be explaining us what is there in the image, what seeing people can see there. So the caption can be, for example, resident coordinator, raising the flag on a rainbow day or on a Idaho Hobbit Day, for example. But then the image description should be a person wearing maybe black, long traditional dress with a long hair, holding a flag in her hand, something like this. So that would be an image description. And sometimes we use table and also a graph to make our presentation or to make our document more clear to audience. So in those cases, for graphs and for tables, we can always add alternative text. So where when we say alternative text, it means that actually the text will provide us a glimpse in a short sentence, like for maximum it's 150 characters. And if we have to write something that goes beyond 150 characters, then please do provide explanation of that tables or graph for everyone, not only in alternative text. But then that alternative text generally would say, okay, the graph presenting showing X and Y axis of, let's say, consumer spending habit in winter and summer, for example. That's a kind of alternative text. Or maybe there's a table showing income, level of income among migrant worker in certain countries from different countries, like let's say in the UK from different countries, something like that. So alternative text would give us what the table is actually talking it about and what the table is trying to show. And there always we need to use a header row or header column, which are available features that are available there in the Excel sheet. But generally, what we do is we just kind of make a heading ourselves, using tab and enter and making without actually going through the available features there. Um, and when we do that, it won't be like our screen readers won't detect them. And then also, when we write a big documents, let's say a digital content, there we have to use a proper heading, you know. And most often, like I also experience, like people would make a heading in a document by using tab, for example, and then they would make a bigger font, and they would even like maybe use a bold or in a bold or underline, and that is not recognized by screen reader as headings. When you use the features, heading features within edit and review features in word processing software, then it will read out actually where heading should be or whether it is heading or otherwise. And so what I'm trying to say here is like there are many features like headings, alternative text, image descriptions, and also we can even this could be a little different from between Apple and Windows. Sometimes I can navigate between paragraphs in Windows, also in Microsoft Word, also like I can use only paragraph. There's a specific command by which where we read only paragraph. But for us to enable that, to use that features, the paragraph should be properly marked. It should be uh, done with the features available within the software, rather than just trying to make ourselves, using by Shift Enter or Shift Tab or Tab, something like that. So this is always like, I mean, when people would make document with Excel, generally it's looking good. There's a paragraph. It looks like paragraph. It looks like heading. Yeah, it's a good image. You have a caption. But the thing, if we don't use accessible features, those things won't be available to us, and then we miss out on very important information. And then, I mean, it's not that difficult when I'm speaking. Maybe it is sounding technical, or maybe you might be thinking, oh, where do I find this? How to do it? But actually, these are very simple steps, simple thing. Once we start doing it, we feel like doing it, and then it's just easy to do it. For example, on any table or image, if we want to add alternative text, there's always a feature where we can go to image, we highlight it, we click the right click button, and then there will be a pop-up alternative text, add alt text feature will be there, and there you can add alternative text. Um, Sometimes social media, when you say digital content is also social media. Also, I mean, in UN we do use social media, Twitter, Facebook, a lot. So social media also need to be accessible. It has to be accessible. And sometimes what I have found is people tend to rely on whatever features is available there in Facebook or other software, other program. Yeah, we do get some explanation which is automatically generated by the software, but that's always not reliable. So it's always good to have your opinion or your words there, rather than just leaving it for software to interpret whatever you are putting in social media. For example, you might have put a picture of a UN garden while celebrating UN Day, on October 24, 23. I forgot the date. But and then if there's image going on in Facebook, it may tells me there's people under the tree, group of people under the tree. So do you think that should be okay? Or you want to convey the proper message, actually saying UN personnel celebrating UN Day in UN garden? So that's always something like that. We have to be careful, and we should not rely upon artificial intelligence or the automated alternative text or automated image descriptions. It's always good to use our own words for those content as well. Um, and then recently in Nepal, we were discussing to put one video for your reference here, but I could not, because yesterday when I rehearsed my talk for this session, I found out the subtitle made available in the video was not readable for my screen readers. But it was seeing possible sighted persons could read that subtitle, but my screen reader was not reading it out. So, for example, if I had a if I'm going through some English documentary, let's say for example, or English video where people are talking about UN, and suddenly there's people pop up, saying things about their life or their experience with UN in French or Arabic or some other language. In that case, I would wish and I would love to have subtitle in English, and so that I can follow their conversation. So for me, for screen reader to enable that facility, there should be an features where subtitles can be turned on and turned off. And also I can continue to listen to the voices that are there in the video. So if we don't pay attention to accessibility features, then we will have a subtitle, for example, or we may have a sign language interpretation in one of the boxes, but then actually we are not making it accessible for screen reader users, and we are not fulfilling our responsibility. And I would here, I'm not here to promote BBC, but I would definitely, I must say, when I look into or when I listen to videos there in a BBC, a real time player or real their playlist, and especially within picture in picture mode, I can actually listen to subtitle. I can turn them on, turn them off, and also continue watching video and enjoy video like everybody else. So these are few things I think we need to pay attention to while preparing digital content. And I'm speaking from my experience. And in Nepal, in this regard, we are trying to do two things here. So first of all, we have prepared a kind of a booklet, even though we gave it a name, SOP, very fancy name, like it says like standard operation procedure. It is actually a booklet where we have included with the pictures and also special commands that where we need to go, for people to help, like how to do when they question how to make their document accessible. We are addressing all those things. We are including links and also pictures and also showing them how to do it. So these features, like we're preparing a booklet where we have included ways to make accessible Word document, ways to make accessible PowerPoint, ways to make accessible emails, and also ways to make a little bit on accessible websites, and also a few things on ways to conduct accessible online meetings. So these booklets, we're trying to roll it out and see feedback of we would want to follow up with UN personnel here in Nepal, how they find it, to use it, whether it is easier or they still find it difficult, or they would like to have something else than this booklet. We want to see that, but this is something we want to make a practice here in Nepal, so that every communication material that goes out from the UN country team in Nepal, or every document that we produce for public consumption, are accessible and can be reached out to, can be enjoyed by all persons, including many persons with disabilities, and not only visually impaired, by diverse group of disabilities and impairments. And we are working on the making on accessible video. So far, like I said earlier, we haven't reached there, but there is a few efforts. And we also have developed an accessible PowerPoint template, so that UN personnel in Nepal can use it, and at the same time it looks good, and also it's accessible. So for this, we had a big support from HEBA, and also we worked in a team, and we also engaged our consultant, accessible, the consultant for digital accessibility available here in Nepal. We closely work in a team, and we have developed this template, and we are hopeful that we will get the accessible template rolled out also for everybody's use in UN Nepal, and as well as we are hopeful that DCO would finally actually roll it out over the UN system, so that all PowerPoint would become accessible as well as beautiful to look at. I'll stop here, Heba. If there's any questions or any aspect you want me to cover, please let me know. If did I meet your expectation?
Yes, thank you so much, Shiva. That was really good. That was excellent. And the reason why it feeds in very well with what we have discussed today is that when we have online meetings, sometimes we share documents, sometimes we are sharing presentations with the participants. So it is always essential to make sure that all the documents we're sharing are accessible. And I'd like to apologize to all the attendees here about the delay in sharing the presentation of the past webinar. We're working on that, and you will receive an email very shortly with the past webinars, recording and presentations. Now I do not see any questions in the chat. I'm not sure if anyone is raising their hand. But I would like to share with you the accessibility settings that are available in Teams and Zoom. So I will reshare my screen and show you how to navigate through that. So I hope you can see my screen. I will start with the Teams. So that's the Teams window. And I will activate the settings. Let me see. And inside the settings, there should be an accessibility option. Yes, this is the accessibility option. And here in this option, you can prioritize signers on the screen. So everyone that that is a sign language interpreter will have priority with his or her video feeds. So I can just check this option. Also, I can manage signers, meaning that I can add certain people from here to mark as sign language interpreters. So when I add them, their video will be prioritized. Also, I close it. Don't know why I closed it. Sorry. You can always show captions in your meetings, even if you're not the organizer. You can still modify this option. I pressed it now. And you can turn off anyway animation, as we said, but this will require just to restart Teams in order for it to work. Also, in the settings, there's keyboard shortcut keys, keyboard options. Let me. And you can see all keyboard shortcuts from here for all meeting MS Teams meeting features. There is an Office Accessibility Center. This is very helpful if you want to check the support of the different Office applications. You can go visit this link. So that's another option that you can distribute to meeting participants who are persons with disabilities as well. Also, in the settings, there is another thing for the captions, another icon. And you can set meeting captions to be automatically identified, as we said. And this is more concerned with filtering of some words, but I just wanted to show you that this option is also available. So when it comes to setting up a new meeting, there are certain options, like we say, for example, to mute mic and camera for all attendees. This could be very helpful, either in MS Teams or in Zoom. And now I'm going to show you the Zoom software. There are also some accessibility features in the Zoom software that's available. So I'm now in a meeting window. Let me see. So I can have some options for the participants. This doesn't relate to accessibility. Let me see. Using the whiteboards is not very accessible either in Zoom or MS Teams. So always opt for using the direct chat messages for comments. And in this meeting control, you can control some chat previews. You can disable or enable the chat preview. This could be helpful for persons with some visual conditions. If you have the chat preview enabled, it will make the screen very cluttered with messages and with the video feeds of the participants and the presenters, which makes it very difficult for them to. So always try to make the screen as free as possible. In order you can do this by hiding the chat preview. So you can always mute the notification in the Zoom as well, and hide the incoming video and make the screen easier to see. So these are the features I wanted to share with you. And let me just go to the presentation very quickly to see if you have any questions. I will not see if you are raising your virtual hand, so feel free to write down in the chat or unmute yourself. You have the possibility to unmute yourself and raise any questions. Okay, if there are no more questions, So I would like you to think what are the main takeaways that you have gained from the session, and what are the immediate actions that you are going to do immediately after concluding this webinar in order to make your online meetings more accessible. It can be very small actions, like starting describing yourself if you feel comfortable with it, or your surroundings, or turning on your camera if possible, or even by when you're presenting by visually describing the visual content that you are presenting in your presentations. So any kind of immediate action that you can do, because as we said, accessibility is the responsibility of everyone involved. These are some, as you can see, some additional resources and videos that you can always go back to for your reference. And I'd like also to ask you for your feedback, because your feedback is very important to us. So this slide now contains a QR code that you can use, scan it on your phone and provide us with feedback. And also I'm going to send the link in the chat also for you to I hope that the link is accessible. Let me know if you cannot click on the links. So that's all from my side today. That's the end of the presentation. I hope that the information presented was useful, and I apologize for any technical errors on my part, but I didn't have sighted assistants with me from the beginning of the webinar, so I really apologize.